police report said there were no signs of forced entry, no missing items, and no evidence of a struggle. It also said the homeowner was found sitting upright in his living room chair, eyes open, hands folded in his lap, facing the front door. Time of death, unknown. Cause of death, undetermined. The only unusual detail noted was that every light in the house was on. Every single one. I'm the one who called it in. My name is Richard Hale. I'm 68 years old, retired, and until last winter, I lived 2 houses down from Thomas Breyer. Tom was the kind of neighbor people like to pretend still exists everywhere. Quiet, polite, predictable. He mowed his lawn every Thursday morning in the summer, even when it didn't really need it. He put his trash cans out the night before pickup like clockwork. And every evening, just before sunset, he turned on the porch light and sat in his living room with a book and a cup of tea. That porch light was important to him. He once told me he liked knowing exactly when night started. Said it made the day feel properly finished. So when I noticed that every light in his house was on at 3 in the morning, it didn't just seem odd. Felt wrong in a way I couldn't explain. I'd woken up because I couldn't sleep. That happens more often as you get older. You stop trusting silence. You start listening to it too closely. I went to the kitchen for a glass of water and happened to look out the window toward Tom's place. At first, I thought maybe he'd had company, or maybe he'd fallen asleep watching television again. But then I realized the upstairs lights were on too, and the hallway, and the bathroom, and the little lamp he kept in the corner of his dining room. Every window glowed. It looked like a house trying very hard not to be dark. I stood there longer than I meant to, staring at it, waiting for something to change. Nothing did. I told myself to mind my own business. Then I told myself that Tom was 74, lived alone, and had a heart condition he liked to pretend wasn't serious. Finally, I put on my coat and went outside. The street was quiet. Too quiet, maybe, but that's how our neighborhood always was at night. No traffic, no people, just the soft hum of distant highway noise and the crunch of frost under my shoes. Tom's front door was closed. His porch light was on, same as always. But through the windows I could see the living room clearly. He was sitting in his chair. At first, that was a relief. Then I noticed he wasn't moving. I knocked. No answer. I knocked again, louder this time. Still nothing. I called his name. No response. That's when I noticed his phone on the small table by the door. Screen lit up. Not with a call or a message. Just the home screen. Like he'd picked it up, unlocked it, and then put it down again without doing anything. I tried the door. It was unlocked. I shouldn't have gone in. I know that now. But at the time, all I could think was that something was wrong and that if I didn't check, no one else would until morning. The house smelled normal, clean, faintly of tea and old books. All the lights were on, just like I'd seen from outside. Not just the main ones, either. Every lamp, every small light in every corner. It was bright enough that it felt artificial, like a stage set. Tom was sitting in his usual chair, facing the front door. His back was straight. His hands were folded neatly in his lap. His eyes were open. He looked like he was waiting for someone. I said his name again and stepped closer. That's when I realized he wasn't breathing. I didn't touch him. I didn't check for a pulse. I didn't do anything except back away and pull out my phone with hands that suddenly didn't feel like they belonged to me. The police came quickly. An ambulance too, even though I told them he was already gone. They asked me questions. They looked around. They took notes. One of them, a younger officer, walked through the house turning off lights as he went, like the brightness was bothering him. When he reached the hallway, he stopped. "Sir," he said, "did you turn these on? All of them?" I asked. "No, they were already like that." He looked at me for a long moment, then continued down the hall. Later, one of the detectives told me something that didn't make it into the report. Tom's bedroom light was on. So was the closet light, and the bathroom, and the small storage room at the back of the house that Tom never used. "Maybe he just couldn't sleep," the detective said. "Some people do that. Turn on all the lights. Makes them feel safer." "Did you find anything?" I asked. He shook his head. No signs of anyone else. No signs he fell or hurt himself. No signs of a struggle. It's like he just stopped. They ruled it natural causes. Eventually, but they couldn't tell me exactly what happened. After that, the house stayed empty. Tom didn't have any close family. Some distant relatives handled the paperwork, but no one moved in. For months, it just sat there, dark and quiet. Until one night, I noticed something. The porch light was on. Just the porch light. Like always, I told myself it must be a timer. Or maybe the real estate agent came by and forgot to turn it off. But the next night, the living room light was on too. Then the hallway. Then, a few nights later, I saw the upstairs bedroom light glowing again. I didn't tell anyone. I didn't want to sound paranoid. I didn't want to be the old man who thought empty houses were doing things. But one evening, as the sun was going down, I saw something that made my stomach tighten. A shadow moved past the living room window. Not fast. Not like someone walking by. Slow. Careful. Like someone inside the house moving from one room to another. I stood at my window for a long time, watching. The lights stayed on. Nothing else moved. The next morning, I walked over and checked the front door. It was locked. The windows were intact. No signs of anyone breaking in. But through the glass I could see the chair. Tom's chair. It was no longer facing the front door. It was turned slightly, angled toward the hallway, like someone had been sitting there and decided to look somewhere else. I stopped going near the house after that. I stopped looking at it at night too, as much as I could help it. But sometimes, when you wake up and the house is quiet, your eyes just go to the window without you telling them to. More and more lights started turning on. Not all at once. One by one. A lamp here, a bathroom light there, the small light over the kitchen sink. Always in the evening. Always just after sunset. Always when no one was around to see it happen. I called the police again. They checked. Found nothing. Told me it was probably faulty wiring. Old house. Old circuits. I wanted to believe that. Then one night, I saw the front door open. Just a crack. Light spilled out onto the porch like the house was breathing. I watched it for nearly an hour. It never opened wider. It never closed. It just stayed there, slightly ajar. Inviting. The next morning, the door was shut again. Locked. And the chair in the living room was facing the door once more. Exactly the way Tom used to sit. I moved 6 months later. Couldn't stand seeing that house anymore. Sometimes, though, when I wake up in my new place and the room feels too bright, I remember something the detective said. They checked the electrical system in Tom's house. There was no reason all those lights should have been on at the same time. The circuit couldn't handle it. It should have tripped. But it didn't. The first thing the state trooper asked me was whether I'd noticed the windows. I told him I hadn't. Not really. When you're driving for 8 hours straight and the sky is already turning the color of wet concrete, you don't pay much attention to details in a town you never planned to stop in. You just look for gas, coffee, and maybe a place to sleep that doesn't smell like cigarettes. He wrote something down, then asked, "Are you sure?" That's when I realized he wasn't talking about my car. He was talking about the houses. I'm 71 years old, widowed, retired from a job I never liked but stayed in because it paid the bills. Once a year, I drive from Arizona up to visit my sister in northern Idaho. It's a long trip, and every year I tell myself I'll split it into 2 days. Every year, I end up pushing too far and stopping somewhere I've never heard of. This time, that place was called Marrow Creek. I didn't see a sign for it until I was already slowing down. Just a small green marker by the road, half hidden by weeds. The town itself looked like a postcard that had been left out in the rain too long. One main street, a diner, a gas station, a handful of houses set back from the road. Quiet, tired. It was just after dusk when I pulled in. The gas station was open, but no one was inside. Lights were on. Door unlocked. The little bell over the entrance rang when I stepped in, but no one came out from the back. I waited a minute, then two. Finally, I left some cash on the counter for the gas I'd already pumped and went back to my car. That's when I noticed the windows. Every building on the street had its windows open. Not wide, just enough to let air in. The diner, the hardware store, the little office that might once have been a bank. Even the houses farther down the road. All of them had at least one window open, dark inside, like the town was holding its breath. I remember thinking it was strange, because the air was cold. Not freezing, but cold enough that I wouldn't have left my own windows open at home. Still, people do odd things, especially in small towns. I found a motel at the edge of Marrow Creek. 2 stories, faded sign, office light on. The clerk was an older woman with gray hair pulled back in a tight bun. She barely looked at me when I signed the register. "Just one night," I said. She nodded. "You're in room 12. Don't open the window." I looked up at her. "What? Just don't open it," she said, still not meeting my eyes. I almost laughed. Almost. Something about her tone made it hard. The room was clean enough. Old but clean. The window was already closed, curtains drawn. I ordered a sandwich from the diner and ate it in my room while watching a rerun of some game show I'd already seen a dozen times. Around 10, I heard footsteps outside. Not in the hallway. Outside. On the gravel. Slow. Careful. I told myself it was just someone else staying at the motel, maybe walking their dog or having a smoke. Then I noticed something else. The sound wasn't moving away. It was pacing, back and forth, right under my window. I sat on the edge of the bed and listened. The footsteps would stop, then start again, then stop, like whoever it was couldn't decide where to go. After a few minutes, I got up and peeked through the curtain. There was no one there. The gravel was empty. The parking lot was empty. The road was empty. I went back to bed and tried to sleep. Sometime in the night, I woke up because I felt cold. Not just chilly. Cold like a draft had found me. I opened my eyes and saw the curtain moving. Just slightly. The window was open. I know it hadn't been before. I'd made a point of checking it after what the clerk said. I got up and closed it, then locked it. When I turned back toward the room, I noticed something on the glass. From the outside, a handprint, not pressed flat, just fingertips, like someone had been testing it. In the morning, I went back to the office to check out early. The clerk looked at me for the first time then. Really looked at me. "You opened it," she said. "No," I told her. "I didn't." She sighed like she'd heard that before. "You should leave." I was planning to. I hesitated, then asked, "Why does everyone leave their windows open?" She didn't answer right away. Then she said, "So they don't have to open the doors." I didn't know what that meant, and I didn't ask. As I was driving out of town, a state trooper waved me down. He asked if I'd stayed the night. He asked if I'd opened the window. He asked if I'd heard anything. That's when he asked about the windows. I looked back toward Marrow Creek. In the daylight, it looked normal. Quiet but normal. Except for the windows. Still open. All of them. "Why?" I asked him. He shifted his weight and said, "People here started hearing things a few years back. Knocking, tapping, scratching. Always at night. So they opened the windows? They tried locking everything first," he said. "Didn't help. What happens if they don't?" He didn't answer. I drove away. 2 weeks later, I saw Marrow Creek on the news. They said there had been a fire. Most of the town burned down overnight. No one could explain how it started. They found no bodies, no cars in the driveways, no signs that anyone had tried to escape. Just empty buildings, with every window open. The last tape wasn't labeled. It was just sitting on top of the stack like someone wanted me to find it first. I wish I hadn't played it. Some things feel better when they stay as possibilities instead of memories. My name is Eleanor Price. I'm 64, retired from public library work, and until 2 years ago I lived in a small house outside of Hannibal, Missouri. Nothing special about it. 2 bedrooms, 1 bath, a little porch that faced the road. The kind of place you buy because it's affordable and stay in because it's familiar. The house had belonged to my parents before me. After they passed, I kept it. Too many memories to let it go. Too many habits tied to the walls and floors. When I finally decided to move closer to my daughter, I spent weeks sorting through old boxes in the attic. That's where I found the tapes. They were VHS, a whole cardboard box full of them. No labels, no dates, just plain black cassettes stacked neatly. We never owned a video camera. At least not that I remembered. Curiosity is a dangerous thing when you're alone. I still had an old VCR in a closet. It took me half an hour to get it working, and another 10 minutes to find a television it could connect to. The first tape started with static. Then the picture cleared. It was my living room, not from any angle I recognized. The camera was positioned high, near the corner of the ceiling, angled down toward the couch and the front door. The timestamp in the corner said 2:14 a.m. The room was empty. I watched for a few minutes, expecting something to happen. Nothing did. Just my empty living room in the middle of the night. I fast-forwarded. 2:37, something changed. A shadow moved across the floor. Not from the window, from the hallway. Then my mother walked into the frame. You have to understand, my mother had been dead for 12 years. But there she was, wearing her old robe, moving slowly, like she'd just gotten out of bed. She stood in the middle of the living room and looked straight at the camera. Not around it, not past it, at it. Then she said, "You shouldn't be watching these." The tape cut to static. I sat there for a long time before I realized I was holding my breath. I told myself it had to be some old home movie, some strange angle I didn't remember, some trick of memory. I played another tape. This one showed my kitchen. Same angle, high corner, looking down at the table and the sink. Timestamp, 1:03 a.m. The room was empty at first. Then a chair scraped back. Slowly, by itself. It moved just enough for someone to sit down. Then my father walked into frame. He sat, put his hands on the table, and stared at the camera. He didn't speak. He just watched. For 7 minutes. Then he stood up and walked out of frame. Static. I didn't sleep that night. The next day, I went back to the attic and looked for more tapes. There were at least 50. All identical. All unlabeled. I told myself to stop. I didn't. The third tape was my hallway. The fourth was the bedroom. The fifth was the basement stairs. Every room in the house. Always filmed from a high corner. Always in the middle of the night. Sometimes the rooms were empty. Sometimes they weren't. On one tape, I saw myself. I was standing in the hallway, wearing a nightgown I still owned, staring at the wall like I was listening to something inside it. I didn't remember that night. On another, I saw my mother standing outside my bedroom door, not moving, not blinking, just waiting. The timestamps didn't match any dates I could remember. Some were from years ago, some were from after my parents died, and some were from the previous week. I checked the attic. I checked every closet. I checked the basement. There were no cameras, no wires, no holes in the walls. That night, I didn't turn off the lights. Around 2 a.m., I heard a soft click, like plastic snapping into place. Then another. Then another. I sat in my bed, heart pounding, listening as the sounds moved through the house. Click, pause, click, like someone was setting something up. I didn't leave my room until morning. When I did, I found something new in the living room. In the top corner of the wall, just below the ceiling, was a small black dot, perfectly round, about the size of a pencil eraser. I moved closer. It wasn't a hole. It wasn't a nail. It was a lens. I moved out 3 days later. I didn't take the tapes with me. I left them in the attic. Sometimes I wonder who's watching the house now, and what they're recording. The announcement came through the speakers in a voice that didn't sound quite human. It wasn't distorted, exactly. It was just tired, like it had been saying the same thing for a very long time. Next stop, Ashford Terminal. Final stop, please exit the train. The problem was, Ashford Terminal had been closed for more than 30 years. I knew that because I'd worked for the Transit Authority for almost 2 decades before retiring. I knew every station on that line, every renovation, every closure, every temporary platform that turned permanent because nobody wanted to pay to fix it. Ashford had been shut down after a tunnel collapse. No fatalities officially, but enough structural damage that it was cheaper to seal it off and reroute the trains. They'd bricked up the entrances, pulled the signage, and eventually stopped even mentioning it on maps. So when I heard that name over the intercom, my first thought was that the system was glitching. My second thought was that the train was slowing down. I was on my way home from visiting my sister in Hartford. It was late, just past 11, and the car I was in was mostly empty. A young couple asleep near the front. A man in a work jacket staring at his phone. A woman with headphones who hadn't looked up once since I'd boarded. The lights flickered as the train began to decelerate. I felt that familiar tug of unease you get when something routine suddenly isn't. The tunnel outside the windows wasn't supposed to look like this. It was too wide. The walls were rough, not smooth concrete. Darker, too, like the light was being swallowed instead of reflected. The train slowed to a stop. The doors didn't open right away. For a moment, no one moved. Then the man in the work jacket stood up, stretched, and walked toward the doors like this was perfectly normal. I said, "They're not supposed to stop here." He didn't look at me. "They always stop here." The doors slid open. The platform was dimly lit by a few old fluorescent fixtures that hummed like insects. The sign on the wall said Ashford in chipped white letters. I hadn't seen that sign since I was in my 40s. A smell drifted in from the platform. Dust, damp, something else I couldn't place. The man in the jacket stepped off. So did the woman with the headphones. The young couple stayed asleep. I stayed in my seat. The doors stayed open longer than usual. I felt an odd pressure in my chest, like the train was waiting for something, or someone. A conductor walked past, moving down the aisle. He looked older than any conductor I remembered. His uniform faded. His face lined in a way that suggested he hadn't slept properly in years. "Sir," I said, "this station is closed." He stopped and looked at me. For a second, his expression was blank. Then he said, "Not for you." "What does that mean?" "It means you should get off." "I'm not getting off at a closed station." He tilted his head slightly. "You already have." I looked around. The car was empty. The lights were dimmer. The doors were still open. I stood up slowly and walked to the doorway. The platform looked longer than it should have been. The tunnel beyond it was darker than any tunnel I'd ever seen, like it didn't reflect light at all. "How do I get back on the train?" I asked. The conductor pointed down the platform. "Through the exit." "There is no exit." "There is," he said. "It just isn't where you remember it." I stepped onto the platform. The air felt heavier there, thicker, like it resisted movement. When I turned around, the train doors were closed. The train was gone. The platform lights flickered. I walked. The station didn't match my memory. The layout was wrong. Corridors curved where they should have been straight. Signs pointed to places that didn't exist on any map I'd ever seen. I passed a bench with 3 people sitting on it. They were very still. Too still. One of them slowly turned his head and looked at me. "Did they change the schedule again?" he asked. I think I got off at the wrong stop," I said. He nodded like he'd heard that a lot. "We all did." I found a wall map. It showed one line. No connections. No transfers. Just a loop, with one station marked in bold. Ashford, final. I walked for what felt like an hour before I found a staircase. It went up. That felt like a good sign. At the top was a door. It opened onto another platform. Another train was waiting there. This one looked older, dirtier. The sign above it didn't show a destination. Just one word, return. I got on. The doors closed immediately. The train started moving. I don't remember the ride. I remember waking up on a bench at a normal station, with a security guard asking if I was okay. He said I'd been found sleeping there after the last train of the night. I told him about Ashford. He frowned. "There's no station there anymore." "I know," I said. "I used to work for you people." He helped me up and pointed at the map on the wall. "Then tell me why it's back." I looked. There it was. A small dot on the line, labeled Ashford. "I don't take the train anymore." Sometimes, though, late at night, I hear that announcement in my dreams. Final stop. And I wake up feeling like I missed my chance to stay on. They told me my name was already there. That was the part one couldn't get past. Not that someone had carved names into the ice. Kids do that. Drunk fishermen do that. People with too much time and a knife do that. But when the ranger said mine was already there, spelled correctly, first and last, neat and careful, I laughed because it felt like the only reasonable response. Then he showed me. I'm Robert Klein. I'm 70 years old, and I've been fishing the same lake in northern Wisconsin for almost 20 years. Not because the fishing is great. It isn't. But because it's quiet, and because at my age, quiet feels like something you earn. The lake doesn't even have a proper name on most maps. Locals just call it Miller's Lake, even though nobody named Miller has lived nearby for decades. There's a small parking area, a ranger station that's only staffed part-time, and a narrow trail that leads down to the shore. In winter, a few of us still come out. We cut holes in the ice. We sit. We wait. We talk about nothing. That morning, I got there earlier than usual. The sun was just coming up, turning the snow pink and orange in a way that always makes you feel like you're standing inside a painting. There were already footprints on the ice. That wasn't strange. What was strange was where they led. They didn't go to any fishing holes. They didn't go out toward the deeper part of the lake. They formed a loose circle near the center. And inside that circle, something had been scratched into the ice. I couldn't read it from a distance. I assumed it was kids messing around, maybe carving shapes or words. I walked closer. The first name I recognized was Harold Benson. He'd fished the lake for years. Quiet guy. Stopped showing up one winter. Someone said he'd moved to be closer to his son. Someone else said he'd passed away. No one really knew. The second name was Linda Chavez. She used to bring her grandson sometimes. I hadn't seen her in at least 5 years. Then I saw my own. Robert Klein. The letters were deep and clean, like they'd been carved carefully, not rushed. There were no stray marks, no hesitation lines, just names. Neat, intentional. I stepped back and almost slipped. The ranger found me standing there, staring. That one's yours, he said, like he was pointing out a bird or a cloud shape. I figured you'd want to see. You think this is funny? I asked. He shook his head. No, sir, I don't. He told me they'd found 3 more names earlier that week. All people who used to come to the lake. All people who had stopped. Who did this? I asked. No idea. Ice is too hard this time of year for casual carving. And nobody reported seeing anyone out here at night. I knelt and touched the letters of my name. They were cold. Too cold. Remove it, I said. We can't, he replied. It'll mess up the ice. Make it unsafe. I didn't fish that day. I went home and tried to forget about it. 2 days later, I got a call. It was about Harold Benson. They'd found his car in his garage, keys still inside. He wasn't there. A week after that, Linda Chavez's daughter called the ranger station. Her mother hadn't answered her phone in days. They found Linda in her bed. No signs of struggle. No clear cause. Just gone. I went back to the lake. I don't know why. The circle was bigger. There were more names. Some I recognized. Some I didn't. But one thing had changed. My name wasn't the last one anymore. There were 3 new names after it. Scratched just as carefully. Just as neatly. I stopped going to the lake. So did everyone else. But sometimes, when winter comes and the nights get long, I think about how the ranger said my name was already there. And I wonder how long it had been waiting.